So the topic today is a little different. There's a, we look at what was in the Wonder Box, the bylaws, how do we make that be something that feels nurturing and fulfilling to our souls? And yet I think it is a really important part of all that we're about. Article 2, what is that? I think that I know the first time I heard the phrase Article 2 was probably last year, and it floated on the periphery of my awareness. And I kept thinking, oh, I should pay more attention to this, but it was easy not to. But because the Article 2 report came out, it's something that is going to be voted on at GA, and congregations are a very important part of this process. I thought it was important that we spend a little time discussing this. Our Time for All Ages piece illuminated it a little bit more, and we're going to dig into it a little bit deeper. So in a nutshell, as we noted before, Article 2 is the section of the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association that centers on our principles and purposes. And it really is at the center of what we do. I mean, most of us, when we talk about what our beliefs are, look at those 7 principles. And even though we call ourselves a creedless faith, we reflect on those and hold them up as kind of a center for us. It's a covenant, and this is what we agree to as a member congregation to hold up as a center for us. Our faith recognizes that we are ever evolving, and as such, there is a periodic review that's necessary to stay in alignment with all that we look to as a guide. And in fact, such periodic review is written into another part of the bylaws. And I know that you were handed a piece of paper, so I'm going to ask that you refrain from reading it now. So we're required in our bylaws to periodically look at and review the language so that we are in alignment with what is current on our faith tradition today. And as we said, it's been 30 years since this was changed. So this is to better understand the proposed changes. We're going to take a little step back to get a sense of where we started and how we got to where we are today. And we're going to have a very, very condensed history lesson. So if you like history, it'll be good, and hopefully they'll be engaging enough so that if history was not your favorite subject, you'll still glean some goodness from this. So early Universalist statements of belief reiterated that member congregations, churches, were to exercise the spirit of Christian meekness and charity toward those who have different modes of faith and practice, that when the brethren cannot see alike, they may agree to differ. And they were encouraged to let every man be fully persuaded of his own mind. Unitarians held a belief in the growing nobility of man, and it took on a particular significance by the 1930s. The Unitarian, their report affirmed the primacy of free exercise of intelligence in religious believing, that in the long run, the safest guide to truth is human intelligence. So we're really capsulating here. We jumped from like the 1600s, now we're in the 1930s, so we're speeding through here. That this Unitarian statement of belief also affirmed the social implications of religion are indispensable to its vitality and validity, as expressed in terms of social conditions and the struggle to create a just social order. It affirmed the importance of the church as the organized expression of religion, and the necessity of worship as a deliberate form to strengthen the individual's grasp of the highest spiritual values of which he is aware. So we hear that he in there as the language that's used up to this point. At the same time that statement came out in the 1930s, a Universalist statement of belief held that the bond of fellowship in the Universalist Church shall become a common purpose to do the will of God as Jesus revealed it, and to cooperate in establishing the kingdom for which he lived and died. To that end, we avow our faith in God as eternal and all-conquering love, in the spiritual leadership of Jesus, in the supreme worth of every human personality, in the authority of truth known or to be known, and in the power of men of goodwill and sacrificial spirit to overcome all evil and progressively establish the kingdom of God. So we're very much rooted in the universalist tradition, in a Christian worldview. Unitarians went into more of a humanistic worldview. Nonetheless, these both faith traditions were really invested in social justice, and they were both still considered outside of the mainstream of Christian understanding. Life continued to unfold. There was a Second World War. Other societal changes led to the merger of these two liberal faith traditions. So we are speeding through history, right? We're in the 1960s. And in 1961, the UUA was born, and the first iteration of Article 2 offered the following language. And I know sometimes when we look at the statements of belief, the language can get a little clunky, but this is what we have. And in 1961, this is the list of statement of belief that our two joined faith traditions held up. So it was to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined truth for truth as our foundation, to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially surmised in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man, to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships, to implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace, to serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion. And lastly, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. And do you hear, that reading that Jamie did, that thread? Can you hear the thread that William Stafford referred to, the thread that goes among things that change but doesn't change? I mean, from the beginning, there are these pieces that have continued to unfold. Always, we are an evolving faith. Revelation is continuous. So as we've looked at what our statements of belief are, there's this thread that continued, but language changed. And as we know, language is really important to UUs. Has anybody ever been in one of those meetings where you're parsing this word or that word or that word? Oh, what about? So what a challenge to condense what you believe into words that you can live by. And I don't know if any of you have ever written your own credo or statement of belief, and what a challenge that can be to say, this is what I believe. And, so you can imagine how challenging it is for a whole denomination, a whole group of people with we strive to hold such a wide umbrella and to come up with language that can really work for such a wide range of thought. So we're jumping from 1961 to 1985, which saw a revision to Article 2. And that brought the emergence of the 7 principles and the 6 sources that we're familiar with. It's printed in that gray hymnal. Some of you may have a little card in your wallet that lists the 7 principles and 6 sources. And we've gotten used to this language. For many, this language has felt solid. It's felt like a place to hang our hats, but life goes on. The world changes, and we strive to change to reflect the relevance of our faith in this world. So in 2017, there were several proposals at General Assembly for specific changes to the current principles. And one that was proposed was actually adopted. The second source was changed from words and deeds of prophetic women and men to prophetic people. And earlier, I think in the 1985 iteration, the language was made more inclusive as far as gender, it wasn't just men. In 2020, the 8th principle was considered at General Assembly, but the decision was made that rather than continuing to make piecemeal changes to specific principles, the vote was to reconsider how we articulate our faith as a whole. So the Article 2 Study Commission was created as a result, and reconsideration of Article 2 was both the will of the GA delegates and a recommendation of the National Commission on Institutional Change. Because if you think back to 2022, we've had a lot of disruption in our society, a lot of things going on. How do we live into being an anti-racist faith? And how does that filter down from our, the Unitarian Universalist Association into member congregations? So all of that brings us to now. And the proposed changes, that is the handout that you were given. So that just talks about how the language of the principles is being, so the principles and the sources are the language is kind of being merged together. You can look at that at your leisure later. And if you would like to really dig into this, you can easily go on the UUA website and look for the Article 2 study report. It's pretty concise. And Jason, do you have that visual depiction so folks at home can see? Everybody here has that kind of flower image there. And the idea of this image is, it's an image of a chalice, and it has the overlay of the word love over the flames. That really is to lift up the idea of everything we were talking about, that love is at the center of our faith, and that we strive for. And so the 6 outreaching arms that create the circle around the core values. So for the benefit of the folks at home who don't have that handout right now, this is a summary of the proposal. So it starts out, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant, congregation to congregation, and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are. And while you have them there, I'm going to read them aloud for the benefit of the folks at home. So the proposed change right now is, rather than having our 7 principles as delineated, they're looking at a more fluid piece of these 6 shared values of interdependence. And we honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism is the next value. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. So another proposed core value is justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions. Transformation is another one. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian Universalist heritage, never complete and never perfect. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And lastly, equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. So that's the proposed change, and you can see it's quite different. There's lots of opinions about this. There are many people who are they're missing these are our 7 principles, and we can knock them off pretty quickly. If we use these broad words of justice, equity, transformation, etc., how do we convey that if we're talking to somebody else? What does that mean to us? But nonetheless, this is the proposal that's being put forth. And is it perfect? Of course it isn't. But it is a beautiful effort to reflect what Unitarian Universalism strives to be at this time. So what happens next? This GA 2023, delegates will consider the Article 2 proposal. And before it's brought to a vote, there will be many sessions, there'll be reworking, there'll be, so what is proposed here may not be how it really ends up getting voted on. But the vote will be not whether to adopt it, but whether to study it for a year. And it will be to ask the questions, does this feel like it might be the next articulation of our faith? And if there is a vote of 50% of delegates who attend GA, then if there's a 50% vote in favor of it, then the next year, everybody is encouraged to study and discuss it more fully. Then in 2024, the delegates at GA would decide whether to adopt the Article 2 proposal, and that will require a 2/3 majority to pass. National adoption would change our UUA bylaws, and then this is, I think, an important caveat. Each congregation would decide independently whether and how to adopt the new language. So there's a change coming, but you can see we've had change all along, and this is the new iteration of trying to hold all the members of this diverse faith of ours in a way that hopefully will ring true. So if you feel called, and I know this is the first time we've talked about it, some congregations really dug in. Like I said, it was just floating on the periphery of my awareness. But if you're called to be a part of this process, you can get a full report and read it more carefully, because there's more. It's not really extensive, but there's more included. And then you can give your feedback to Jason and Shannon Resch, because they're going to be the delegates for UUG. We have 2, because of our size, we're allocated 2 delegates, and we have 2 people I know who are going to take this to heart. So they will welcome, your feedback, and they'll take part in the business meetings, and they will represent what they understand UUG's position to be on this. And I want to end with the words again of William Stafford once more. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding, and you don't ever let go of the thread. So this is the proposal. When we think about what we believe, what brought you here, why did you come here, this is the heart of what we hope that we are creating in this smaller community. And this is a reflection of what the larger UUA faith is proposing our language be, our statement of purpose. So as I noted, if you have thoughts, we can certainly talk about it. If anybody wants to hold a conversation about it, we can do that. But in particular, give feedback to Shannon and Jason, because they will be taking our thoughts to GA. And Shannon did hand this out. Folks at home, if you want this emailed to you, we can do that, or you can just go online and go to the UUA website and just look up Article 2 study report. So let's take a moment to breathe in all of those words and see if you can find a way that you just get in touch with that love that we are asking to be, that we are hoping that we are holding at the center of this faith. So just breathe in that sense of love, knowing that you're held in love.